Yeah. Good evening, everyone. In the last session, we developed our first web application by using servlets. So, are you able to develop that application? No? Getting some issue in the port number, huh? Okay. Okay. Fine. What about the remaining people? Able to develop? Right. See here, I'm going to develop second application by using servlets. So let's try to develop one more web application by using servlets. So what are the steps we need to follow to develop a servlet application? So first we need to create dynamic web project. Dynamic web application we need to create by using IDE. And then we need to set the build path for one jar file. So set build path for project, which is jar file we are going to add servlet-api.jar, where that jar file will be available. So in the Tomcat server lib folder, that jar file will be available. Add that jar file to the project build path. I can simply say like this: add servlet-api.jar file to project build path. Add servlet-api.jar file to project build path. Then what is the next step? Create servlet class. Create servlet class by extending properties from HTTP servlet class and override do get or do post methods. Do get and do post methods, whichever is required for your operation. Get method is used to get the data from the server. Post method is used to send the data to the server. What are the parameters for do get and do post methods? HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response is the parameters of do get and do post. What is that servlet request and servlet response represents? What is that servlet request? Yeah, perfect. So we need to create a servlet class by extending the properties from HTTP servlet, and we need to override do get method and do post methods. Then what is the next step? Configure URL pattern for the servlet. Configure URL pattern for servlet. In how many ways we can configure the URL pattern? In two ways we can configure the URL pattern. One is by using web.xml or by using @web servlet annotation. So can I configure same URL pattern for two servlets? No, every servlet should have its own URL pattern. Then after run the application using server. You can add the server to the IDE and you can run the application, or you can create the war file and you can deploy the war file in the server also. So create dynamic web project in the IDE, add the servlet jar file to project build path, create the servlet class by extending the properties from HTTP servlet class and override do get method. Override do get method. Currently I'm going for do get method. Configure the URL pattern for the servlet by using web.xml or by using web servlet. See how to add server to IDE. Super. Now run the application using server. Right. I told you 3-4 times. Please watch that video. And I shared the video in the group also. Still people are not watching. That is their problem. All right. Now let us see how I am going to create the project. File, new. I'm going to create a project, static web project or dynamic web project. So we are developing dynamic web applications by using servlet. So we need to create dynamic web project. We can give any name for the project. Now I am giving 02 servlet web app. Whatever the name we are giving for the project, that name, it will consider as a context path. In the browser, we need to access the project by using context path. Because in one server, can we run 2 applications also? Yes or no? So how server will understand request is coming to which application? Based on the context path. Context path is nothing but name of the project. Now I'm giving the project name as 02 servlet web app. Click on next, build classes, web.xml, click on finish. So with this our project got created. With this our project got created. I want to add the jar file to the build path. Dynamic web project option not coming. That means you need to download the correct IDE. Some people yesterday I told you that point also. If you are not able to see the dynamic web project option, your IDE not supporting for web development. You need to download the IDE which supports JEE development. In the browser, you need to type JEE Eclipse. Then you will get the IDE which supports for web development. Got it? Now I have created my project web application. See the folder structure, SRC, nothing is available, and web content is available, web.inf, web.xml. So the web.xml file is called as deployment descriptor. So whatever is there in the web.xml, I'm removing that, not required. What is the root element of the web.xml? Web app. Web app is available as a root element in this web.xml file. Perfect. Next one. I need to create a servlet class. Do you know how to create a servlet class? Yes. Before creating the servlet, we need to set the build path for the jar file. So where that jar file will be available? Jar file will be available in the Tomcat lib folder. So right click, build path, configure build path. Now libraries, add the jars, that is external jar. Select Tomcat lib folder servlet-api.jar file. Now click on apply, close. So with this our build path is ready. Project is created and build path is also added. Now we need to create a servlet class by extending the properties from HTTP servlet. Total how many ways we can create the servlet? How many ways we can create the servlet, guys? We can create the servlet in 3 ways. What are those 3 ways? By extending servlet interface, by extending generic, by implementing servlet interface, or by extending generic servlet, or by extending HTTP servlet. Out of these 3, which one is recommended? Extending the HTTP servlet is recommended. Okay, I am trying to create one Java class in the SRC. Right click, new class. You can create any name. You can create the class with any name. So package some in dot Ashok IT, and I'm creating this as first servlet. I'm creating this as a first servlet. Now this is a normal Java class. This is a normal Java class. If I want to make this class as a servlet class, I need to extend the properties from either generic servlet or HTTP servlet, or I can implement servlet interface also. Out of these 3 options, HTTP servlet is the recommended option. Now I am extending from HTTP servlet. So HTTP servlet is our class or it is a predefined class? Predefined class available in the servlet API. What is the package name? javax.servlet.http.http servlet. In the HTTP servlet class, there are so many methods already available. We are overriding those methods. How we can override the method? All right. I'm writing a servlet class which is extending from HTTP servlet. Public void do get method I'm writing. What is the purpose of this do get method? What is the purpose of do get method? We are extending the properties. We are extending the properties from HTTP servlet and we are overriding do get method. Do get method will take two parameters. One is HTTP servlet request. Another one is HTTP servlet response. Now, what is this request and response will represent? What is this request and response will represent? Request will represent HTTP request structure. Request object will represent HTTP request structure. Response object will represent HTTP response structure. Whatever the request giving by the client, that client request we are going to receive for our servlet, and from the servlet we can write some data to the response and we can send that response to the client. Now I have a request and response. Currently client is not sending any data in the request. I want to send some message to the client in the response. Can you tell me how can I send that message to the client in the response? First we need to get the writer. How to get the writer? Response dot get writer. What is the return type of this writer? It is giving the print writer object. This writer is giving the print writer object. So what is the method available in the print writer to write the response? Print writer object. Yeah. What is the method? Writer dot append. Can I send some message? Yeah. So this message coming from first servlet. Welcome to web development. Welcome to web development. We can print that by using H1 to display in the bigger font. H1. Perfect. So with this our servlet class is created. This is our first servlet. It is extending from HTTP servlet. I want to map address for my servlet. I want to map address for my servlet. How to map the address for this servlet? Come on guys. How to map address to the servlet? Two ways. One is XML. Second one is annotation. I'm going for @web servlet and I am making this as first. That's it. Anything. You can give any URL pattern for the servlet. So with this my servlet class is created and my servlet is mapped to URL pattern also. Perfect. Now I want to run this application. How to run the application? Already there is server. Already there is a server added in my IDE. Okay. Right click on the project, run on server. Right click, run on server. Click on this server, select. It is asking, I'm trying to deploy second application. Do you want to deploy the first application also? Can I deploy two applications at a time? Can I run more than one application in one server? Yes. How server will differentiate them? Not URL, project name. It is going to differentiate them by using project name. Project name is called context path. Okay. I want to deploy only second application now. Here you can select this, you can add, configure. Two applications are going to deploy. Suppose I don't want to deploy first application. Select it, click on remove. Okay, that is undeployed. Now I want to deploy the second application, click on finish. Now my application is getting deployed into server. If anybody facing port number, you need to change the port number in the server.xml file. Maybe some process is already running on the same port number. You did not stop your server properly in the previous execution. That's why you will get the address already in use exception. If you get address already in use, that means you need to change your server port number. Where did you change the server port number? Where to change that? In the server.xml file, you need to change that port number. So my application started, go to browser, access this application. So you need to give the URL as localhost:8080/project name. That is called our context path /URL pattern. What is the URL pattern? First, welcome to web development. Are we able to access our servlet? Are we executing the servlet or we are accessing the servlet? We are accessing the servlet. Who is executing the servlet? Server is executing the servlet. Inside the server, servlet container is available. That servlet container is executing our servlet based on the request. Servlet container is executing the servlet based on the request. Now let's understand how it is working internally. How it is working internally. Now, so here we have server. Inside this server, we are deploying our application. This is our server. Inside the server, we are deploying our application. Assume that this is our application. This is our application. Inside this application, we can have multiple servlets. One application can contain multiple servlets, right? Yes or no? Can I create 10 servlets in one application? Yes, you can create 10 servlets also in one application. I have deployed my application inside the server. Now, this application is having some name. Application name will be available. That application name is called as a context path. The application name is called as context path. Every application will have context path. Every app will have context path. That context path is called as name of the project. When we are running our application in the server, server will identify our application based on the context path. That's fine. My application is available in the server. Can I deploy one more application in the same server? So then if I am deploying 2 applications in the same server, application context path should be same or context path should be different? Different. Why context path should be different? Why context path should be different? Come on. Why context path should be different? Server should understand request is coming to which application. Server should understand request is coming to which application. In the real time, we don't deploy 2 applications in one server. We don't do that, but it is possible. If you want, you can deploy 2 applications into one server. But in the real time, we will never deploy 2 applications into one server. What is the reason? Correct. Correct. If you deploy 2 applications into one server, more traffic will come to the server. Load will increase on the server. That's why for one application, one server will be available. So every application will be deployed into one server. Our application will have a context path. Then here user is available, guys. User is sending a request to the server. That means he is a client. Client is using one computer. In that computer he is having a browser and he is making a request to our application from his computer. Client is making a request from his computer. Then that request will be received by whom? Application will receive the request or server is going to receive the request? Application is going to receive the request or server is going to receive the request? Server is going to receive the request. Once the server received the request, immediately server will create 2 objects. Whenever server received the request from the client, immediately server is going to create two objects. Server is going to create two objects. What are those two objects? The first object is request object. The second object is response object. Who is creating that request object and response object? Application is creating or server is creating? Server is creating. When server will create that request object and response object? When client send a request to the server, immediately server will create one request object and response object. After creating the request object and response object, server will open HTTP request object. Okay guys, now client is sending a normal request or client is sending a HTTP request? Client is sending a HTTP request. Do you know what is the format of the HTTP request? Do you know what is the format of the HTTP request? What is the format of the HTTP request? Request line will be available, header will be available, empty line will be available, body also will be available. All that data will go from browser to server. Who is creating HTTP request object? Browser. Who is creating this request object? Browser. Who is sending this request? Browser. Client sending the request by using browser. Confused? Right. Observe. I'm going to browser. I'm typing the URL. I'm clicking on enter. That means I have sent one get request to the server by using browser. Browser is a program which will make HTTP request structure and will send that request to the server. Client will tell to browser to send a HTTP request to the server. So as a client, am I writing any header? Am I writing any body? Am I telling a get method? No, blindly I'm going to the browser and I am taking the browser. I'm using the URL. I'm hitting that URL. Now I am an end user. I don't know anything about HTTP protocol. Do you think that everybody will know about HTTP protocol who is using web application? No, my father will use web application. He don't know anything about software. He don't know anything about network. He don't know anything about this Java and all that stuff. But still they are able to use the web application. How they are able to use? They are opening the browser and they are typing the URL in the browser and they are sending a request. Now I am a client. I'm using a browser. By using this browser, I'm sending a request. What browser is doing is whatever the URL I'm hitting, directly it is not going to server. Browser is doing some operation. What that browser is doing? Browser is creating HTTP request object with a request line. Okay, this client is sending the request to this URL. He is directly sending the URL in the browser. That means it is a get request. Are you guys getting my point? Browser will understand our request information. I'm opening a browser. I'm typing the URL. I'm clicking on enter. Then browser will understand I am sending a get request to the server. This is the URL of the server and this is the URL pattern. Okay. So here localhost colon 8080 localhost colon 8080 / context path / URL pattern. I'm typing this URL in the browser. This is server address. Okay. This is my project context path. This is the resource URL. All this information will understand by browser. Then browser is going to take the data and browser will create a request object. Am I giving any data for the body? Am I sending any data in the body? No, I'm not sending any data in the body. I'm just sending a request by using URL. Then browser will create the request object. Browser will send the request to the server. Whenever the request is sent to the server, immediately, whenever the request comes to the server, immediately server will create the request object and the response object. Are you getting my point? So whenever we send a request to the server, what server is doing? What server is doing whenever we send a request to the server? Server is creating a request object and response object. Observe guys, theoretically we need to understand lot of details. Server is receiving a request from the browser. That request will contain request line, request method, whether it is a get request, whether it is a post request, what is the URL, what is the resource URL. All that information will be available in the request line. Then header data will be available. Then blank line will be available. Then body data will be available. That is the HTTP request. Then server is going to take the request data, will store that data into request object. Will store the data into request object. After storing the data into request object, then server will open that object. Okay, we got a request. So for which resource we got this request? For which application we got the request? What is the context path in the URL? All that information server will understand. Server will open the request and it will see what is the context path. There can be more than one application. This request came for which application? Is it for first application? Is it for second application? It is going to understand that data based on the request line. Then it will check, did we receive any headers in the request? Did we receive any body in the request? All the data server will load into its memory. Server is also a program. Server is reading our request. It is taking the data. It is storing that data into its memory. After storing the data in its memory, server will understand, okay, this request came for this context path. This request came for this context path, that is 0 to servlet web app. This application is getting executed. Client is trying to access a resource available in this application. Based on the context path, server will understand for which application the request came. Then fine. After that, server will check what is this URL pattern /first. Server will check request came for a servlet or a request came for a JSP. If that URL pattern is having .jsp extension, server will understand that request came for a JSP. But my URL is having .jsp or my URL is having /first. What is the meaning of that? It is a servlet URL pattern. It is a servlet URL pattern. Then this server will go to our project and it will check, is there any servlet available in this project which is mapped to that URL pattern? It is going to check in the application. Is there any servlet available in the application which is mapped to that URL pattern? Suppose for example, I'm sending a request to /2. With that URL pattern, is there any servlet available or servlet not available? Available or not available? Not available. If the resource is not available, is it a server problem? Is it my problem? Client problem. Why it is client problem? Client is giving the invalid resource pattern. Client is giving the invalid pattern in the URL. Server is not able to identify the servlet with the given name. Suppose for example, I have given /first. Then what happened? When I give /first, what happened? I want from starting. I'm opening my browser, guys. I'm going for a new tab. I'm typing my URL. I'm clicking on enter. When I click on enter, what will happen in the server? Browser will take our request. Browser will directly send the request or it will manipulate that request. It will manipulate. It will create the request structure, request line, header, blank line, body. It will prepare the structure. Then it will send the request to server. Server received a request. When the request is received by the server, what that server will do? It will open the request. It is going to open the request which came from the browser. Then it will take the data. It will store into its request object. So whenever the request comes, Server is creating the request object and response object. After creating the request object and response object, it is taking the request data and it is storing into request object. After storing in the request object, then server will try to understand this request came for which application and this request is asking for which resource. It is going to understand that by reading the initial request line, URL pattern. What is the context path? What is the URL pattern? It is going to understand. So now here, suppose for example, I am giving it as app/first. Then what will happen? App/first. What is the app here? What is the app here? Context path. Is there any application running with this context path? No. Then what server will do? Boss, whatever the application you are asking, I don't have that application. I can't give you any response. Whatever the application you are asking, that application is not available with me. I can't process your request. Check your URL correctly. Is your URL is correct or not? Please you verify that, then send me the request. Now, whenever I send a request to the server with /app in the URL, server is not able to find the context path. Then server is saying that, boss, whatever the URL you are hitting, that is wrong. I don't know what is the resource you are asking. That information server will store into this response object. Response object is created, right? Whatever the response is there, whether it is a success response or whether it is a client server, failure response or success response, server will store the data into this response object. Request object is available, response object is available. After storing the error response into the response object, then server will send the response back to client. Server is sending the response back to client. That response we are able to see on the browser. What response we got? 404. What is the meaning of 404? What is the meaning of 404? Resource not found. That means whatever you are trying to access, that is not available in the server. So clearly it is sending the response. The requested resource is not available. The requested resource is not available. Who is sending this response to us? Servlet is sending or server is sending? First of all, request reach it to servlet. My request reach it to servlet or my request not reach it to servlet? I'm asking a question once again. Understand. Take 2 minutes break. Think about it. Writing the code is easy. Understanding how it is working is difficult. Everybody, just 2 lines of code. Public class servlet extends from HTTP servlet do get method katham. We are getting the response. That is not important. How that servlet working in the background? What is happening when we send a request? That we are trying to understand. Got it? My question is, I'm taking the URL localhost : 8080/app/first. I send a request. That request received by my servlet or the request is not received by the servlet? Is it received by the servlet or not received by the servlet? Not received by the servlet. Why it is not received by the servlet? Context path is wrong. Whatever the context path I have given, that is wrong. Server is not able to understand which project I am trying to access. So this request not received by servlet. Observe. I have opened browser and I am sending a request to the server. I'm opening my browser. I'm typing the URL. I'm sending the request. When I send a request, what is happening? Can you explain me? Browser is taking our request and creating the HTTP request object and sending to our server. When the request received by the server, what that server is doing? First, it will create 2 objects, guys. First, it is going to create 2 objects. What are the 2 objects? First one is a request object. Second one is a response object. Why request object? Why response object? Request object is used to store the request information sent by the client. Client sent a request. Today I am sending a get request. Tomorrow I will send a post request. Tomorrow I will send some data in the header. I will send one data in the body also. To store that request data, server is creating one request object. And immediately when the request object is created, server is creating the response object also. Why it is creating the response object also? For every request, server has to send some response. For every request, server has to send some response. That's why whenever request comes to the server, immediately it is creating the request object and response object. Are you guys clear? So whenever request is sent to the server, server will create a request object as well as response object. After creating the request object and response object, what our server is doing? It is opening the HTTP request and it is storing into request object. After storing the information into the request object, then what server will do? Then it will read the request data. What is the URL? What is the context path? What is the URL pattern? What data came in the body? Server will understand the request given by the client. Okay, first it will check the context path. Context path. Does that context path available in the server or not? Context path not available. Then context path not available. Then server will understand that okay, this person has sent the request to the invalid URL that is not available with me. Then it will prepare a message for the client. That message it will store in the response object. That response object it will send it to the browser. Browser will manipulate that response and will display to the client in the understandable format. That's where we are getting HTTP status 404 resource not available. Who is giving that information to the browser? Server is giving that information to the browser by using response object. Then that response is printing in the browser for the client. Are you clear, guys? Now let's see second scenario. I'm going to browser. I'm sending a request to the browser. I got the response. Can you tell me how it worked internally? I'm sending a request to my URL, guys. I got the response also. How it is working in the background? First, client opened a browser. Client typed some URL. Client sent the request. Immediately it is going to server? No. Browser is manipulating that. Browser is preparing request structure, line, method. Client is sending a get request to this URL. HTTP method, that URL. This is get request to this URL. There is no data in the header. There is no data in the body. Okay. Just the client is sending a get request to this URL. It will prepare that structure. It will send to the server. Once it is sent to the server, what server is doing internally? Server is creating one request object and response object. After creating the request object and response object, what server is doing? It is opening the HTTP request and it is storing into request object. Done. Then next, it will read the request. After storing the request information into request object, it is understanding what is the context path, what is the URL pattern, what is the request type. Is it a get request? Is it a post request? What is the context path? What is the URL pattern? First it will check this context path is available in my server or not. Context path available. If the context path is available, then it will check the URL pattern. What is my URL pattern? First, now it will scan the servlets. Is there any servlet available whose URL pattern is matching with the /first? Okay. Is there any servlet available whose URL pattern matching with the /first? Yes, there is a servlet available whose URL pattern matching with /first. Now, in that servlet, we have do-get method. Client is sending what request? Get request. Okay. Client send a get request to the first servlet. In the first servlet, do-get method is available. Are you clear, guys? Once a server identified that which is servlet it has to execute, then server will pass this request object and response object to the servlet as a parameter. Are you getting my point? What is the parameters of our doGet method? What is the parameter of doGet method? HTTP request and HTTP response. So who is passing those parameters? Who created those objects? Am I creating the parameters or server is creating the parameter? Server created the request object and response object. That request object and response object, server is passing as a parameter to doGet method and it is calling that doGet method. Are you clear? Two scenarios. One scenario when the URL is incorrect. One scenario when the URL is correct. Now, let's do once again. No problem. First scenario, client has given invalid request. Client has given invalid request. So now tell me what will happen. Client opened browser, typed the URL, send the request. Then browser will manipulate that request into request structure. After manipulating the request into request structure, browser will send that request to server. Can I call it as a HTTP request? Yes, that is called as a HTTP request. Server received that request. When the server received that request, what will happen? Two objects will be created. What are those two objects? One is request object, another one is response object. What is the purpose of request object and response object? Request object is used to store HTTP request data. Response object is used to store HTTP response data. After creating those two objects, server will take the request data, will store into request object. After storing the request data into request object, server is opening the request. What is the URL? What is the context path? What is the type of request? Is it a GET request? Is it a POST request? What is the URL pattern? Server will read all the data. After reading the data, first it will check context path is available or not. Context path is available or not available? Not available. Context path not available. When the context path not available, what server will do? It will prepare a error response. It will prepare a error response. So it is a client problem or it is a server problem? Client problem. So how to represent it is a client problem? 404. It will prepare a error message with the 404 status code. That error message it will store into response object. That response it will send to the browser. Browser will display that response to the client. Are you clear? So what is this scenario? Invalid URL. Now let's go for valid URL. Client is sending a request to the valid URL. Now I'm a client. I'm opening my browser. I'm typing the URL. I'm clicking on send button. What will happen? Come on, what? Simple. Can I explain all the details in the yesterday session? If I explain all the details in the yesterday session, will you understand? Yesterday it was just developing a project. Are we able to run the project or not? Today we are trying to understand how that project working internally, how our requests are processing by the server. So lot of story is there. Lot of story we need to understand. Then only we can develop a web application. Got my point? If you search in the internet, if you search in the Udemy, if you search in the YouTube also, nobody will explain like this. They will just tell you how to create a servlet, how to send a request, response is coming. That's it. Nobody will tell you server will create two objects. One is request object, one is response object. It will prepare error response. It will send to the client. Nobody will give you the details. So if you miss this class, then you are gone. How many of you watching videos completely daily? Backup videos? Is it boring or not? Not boring. Are you watching the videos complete? I will take the report. How many videos you watched? How much percentage you watched also I can find out. Completely you are watching entire video. You will not watch. I'm sure, because you will not get that interest to watch that video, because every day 2 hours session, watching 2 hours video is boring. Yes or no? Definitely watching 2 hours video is boring. Long back, I purchased one course Python in the Udemy. Just I want to see what is Python, how to work with the Python. I have seen 1%. First video I have watched. After that, I lost my interest because it is a recorded video. I'm not getting that interest to watch that video. Understanding my point? So you will also face the same problem. If you miss the live classes, you will not get that concept. So you may think that sir is giving the video. Those videos are useless. You will not feel interest to watch that video. So please concentrate in the class. So some people, body present, mind absent. I can see your face. I can understand that. Who is listening? Who is acting? If you act, then I can't help you, sir. You will not get this content. And you will not watch the videos. You will miss this topic, which is very important to develop the web applications. Tomorrow when you go for company, will anybody ask you to write a program to reverse a string? Write a program to perform sum of two numbers? Write a program to read employee data? No. What you need to do in the company? You need to develop the web application. You need to understand how web application, that reversing the string, reading the data from the keyboard, sum of two numbers, Fibonacci series, those two are to improve your logical thinking. That's it. We don't write those programs in the company. Will any client ask you to write a program to reverse a string in the project? If I enter username, you need to reverse it. Will anybody ask that requirement in the project? No. What client will ask you? Develop a web application. Develop a web application, deploy that web application, give me a project. Give me a project, I should be able to access your project. So the most important thing for you is application development. Then only you can survive in the job. Okay guys, logical thinking is required. At the same time, application development knowledge is most important thing for you. Got it? Yes. Now I'm making a request to the server. What is happening inside the server? My request is valid. My request is valid. Tell me what is happening inside the server. Client is sending a request by using browser. Browser is understanding the request, preparing the request structure, or sending to server. Immediately, server is creating the request object and response object, because for every request, server has to send some response. That response may be success response, or that response may be error response. So it will create the request object and response object. Then it will take the HTTP request data, it will store into request object. Then it will see what is the context path, what is the URL pattern, what is the data in the header, what is the data available in the body, what is the type of the request. Is it a GET request? Is it a POST request? Then server will check whatever the request client is sent, what is that context path? Do I have that context path or not? Context path is available. Okay, first condition passed. When the context path is passed, then server will check what resource he is asking. /first. What is this /first? URL pattern. Then server will check, is there any servlet available in the project whose URL pattern is /first? Yes, there is a servlet available. Okay. Okay, servlet is available. Then what type of request is sent by the client? GET request or POST request? By default, if you send a request in the browser, it is a GET request only. Client has sent a GET request. When a client has sent a GET request, then this server will check in this first servlet, do GET method is available or not? Do GET method is available or not? Okay, do GET method not available. If do GET method is not available, error. So fine, my do GET method is also available. If do GET method is also available, what server will do? What server will do when the do GET method is available? It will call the do GET method by passing this request object and response object as parameters. Are you guys getting my point? So when the do GET method is available for the GET request, server is passing this request object and response object to my servlet, and it is calling my servlet. Now inside this servlet, we got the request data and we got the response data. Can I access some data given by the client in the request? If a client sends the data in the body, where that data will be available? Request object. Can I access the data from the request object? I will take your username. I will take your password. Whatever the form you fill up, your form data will come to the servlet in the request object. Fine. After reading the request data, I will perform some operation with the data. I will insert the data into database. I will insert the data into database, or I will update the data in the database. I will delete the data in the database, or I will retrieve the data from database. I can do whatever I want. Once I got the request data, once I got the request data, I will perform some operations with the data. My operation is completed. Now I want to send some response to client. Am I going to send the response directly, or I need to write the response to this response object? I need to write the response to this response object. Who is responsible to send a response to client? I am responsible, or server is responsible? Server is responsible. Server has given me response object. Hey servlet, if you want any data from the request object, take from the first parameter of the method. If you want to send any data to the response, you write the data to the second parameter. That is the meaning of the request object and response object. My servlet want to send a message to the client. So my servlet cannot send the message to the client directly. My servlet will write the data to this response object. Then server is going to send the response data to the client. Are you guys clear? Whatever the response we are getting from the server, is it a success response? Is it a failure response? Success response or failure response? Success response, because my servlet executed successfully. That is the reason server is sending response to the client as success response. What is the status code to represent a success response? What is the status code to represent success response? 2xx, 200 is the status code to represent the success response. Okay, now let us see one scenario. In my servlet, I am writing string s is equal to null value s dot length. What is this, man? What it is going to do now? My request will go to the servlet. What I am doing inside my servlet? I am trying to create the string object and I am calling s dot length method. When I call s dot length method, what will happen? My code will give null pointer exception. When our code is giving some exception, what are you doing, sir? So when my code is giving the exception, how server will behave? Okay, what is the behavior of the server when we get some exception in the code? Understand that. Let me stop the server. Let me redeploy. Run on server. I'm running my application in the server. I stopped it and I am running it. If you try to run without stopping, you will get the problem because port number already in use. Now, so server is started. Go to browser. Send the request. What error I got now? Earlier we got 404. Now we are getting 500. Why it is giving 500? Is it my problem or is it server problem? Server problem. Server is not able to handle the request properly. Now in this scenario, what happened? Can anyone tell me what happened in this scenario? Can you tell me what happened in this scenario? Come on, guys. What happened in this scenario? Client is sending a request to the server in the browser. Now then, browser is manipulating the request and 1 minute, guys. Client is sending a request by using browser manipulating that request and sending to the server. Then what server is doing? What the server is doing now? Server is creating request object and response object. Server created the request object and response object. It has taken the browser request and stored it into request object. After storing the data into request object, then server is opening the request, reading the context path, reading the URL pattern, reading the type of the request, request header, request body. It is understanding the complete data. Then it will check for the context path. Whatever the application client is asking, is that application available or not? Yes, available. What is the URL pattern? Slash first. Is there any servlet available with that URL pattern? Yes, available. In that servlet, what method? Do get method. What is the type of the request? Get request. Okay, perfect. Get request is available. Do get method available. It taken the request object, response object, pass it to do get method. Do get method is executing null pointer exception. When the do get method is executing, we got the null pointer exception. Whenever the exception occur, it will check in our method. Do we have the logic to handle the exception? Do we have the logic to handle the exception? We don't have the logic to handle the exception. Then server will think that, okay, this program is failed. I can't do anything. Code is not working. When the code is not working, server will fix that code. No. So server cannot do anything. I don't know anything. Okay. There is a problem. It is my problem. I'm not able to execute 500. Prepare the error response. Store the error response to response object. Send the response object to browser. Browser printing the response on the screen. That is what we are seeing. Are you clear? 500 means server error. 400 means client error. 200 means success. Success. Now, are you able to understand how server is processing our request and response? Now, did you get the clarity? What is the purpose of that request object and response object? Yes. What is the purpose of request object and response object? Request object is used to store the request information. Response object is used to store the response information. Now, make a note. How server will process request. How server will process request. Whatever you understood, you write it. Man, 1 hour non-stop I have explained, right? Please write it. How server will process the request. Whatever you understood, you write it. First you take the diagram, then write it. Don't copy, write it. Sorry? No, just I have written like that. You can ignore it. Online people, are you writing that notes? Please do that. Completed, guys. How server will process each request. How server will process each request. It will send that. In the postman we can see 200. So in the browser success code will not display. Yeah. Client will send request using browser. So that may be a get or post. Get or post request. Browser will convert that request into HTTP request and will send it to server. Client will send the request using browser. That may be a get request or it may be a post request. Browser will convert that request into HTTP request and will send to server. Server will receive the request. Server will receive the request and it will create request and response objects. Server will receive the request and it will create the request and response objects. Two objects will be created immediately. One is request object and second one is the response object. Server will open HTTP request. Server will open HTTP request and it will take the request information and it will store into request object. It will store into request object. So whatever the request that is sent by the client, server will open that HTTP request. It will take the request information and it will store into request object. Server will identify the resource which is requested by the client. Server will identify the resource which is requested by the client based on context path and URL pattern. Based on context path and URL pattern. If requested resource is not available, then server will prepare error response and it will store into response object. It will store into response object. So server will identify the resource which is requested by the client based on URL, context path and URL pattern. If requested resource is not available, then server will prepare error response. It will store into response object. So server will, if requested resource is available, then server will call requested resource method. Server will call servlet method by passing request and response objects. If requested resource is available, server will call that servlet method by passing request and response object. Now servlet will execute the logic. Servlet will execute the logic. Will execute the business logic, I can say. Servlet will execute the business logic and it will write the response to response object. Response object. Server will send the response. Server will send response to client. Server will send the response to client. That's it. 8 steps, guys. Now check this. How server will process each request. Client will send request using browser. That may be a get request or it may be a post request. That may be a get request or that may be a post request. Browser will convert that request into HTTP request and will send to server. Server will receive the request and it will create the request and response objects. Server will open HTTP request and it will take the client, give a client request information and it will store into request object. It will store into request object. Server will identify the resource which is requested by the client based on the URL, context path and URL pattern. If requested resource is not available, then server will prepare error response and it will store into response object. If requested resource is available, then server will call that servlet. Will call that servlet method by passing request and response objects. Servlet will execute the business logic and it will write the response to response object. Server will send the response to client. Server will send final response to client, which is available in the response object. So this is the process of request. So whenever you send a request, these many steps are working in the background. So read it. This diagram will represent everything. So client is making a request. Client is using browser. So client is sending a request. Browser is manipulating that request. Let me call it as a browser. Client is using a system. In that system, client is using a browser. By using that browser, client is making a request. Browser manipulating that request to HTTP request and sending to server. Server is receiving that request and creating request object and response object. Then server will open the request information and will store into request object. Will identify the resource which is requested by the client. That means what client is trying to access, /first or /second, /welcome, /greet, what client is trying to access. Now, based on that, server will identify whatever the resource client is asking, is it available in the server or not? If it is not available in the server, server will prepare a error response, will store into response object. It will send that response to the client. Suppose, for example, if the requested resource is available, server will process that request by calling that servlet, by giving the request and response as parameters. Servlet can take the data from the request object, can write the data to response object. Whatever the response is available in the response object, server will send it to the browser. Browser will display to the end user. So this is the request processing step. Are you clear? Yeah, just read it once again. All the steps. How many of you written the notes correctly? Correct? Or any steps are missed? 95% correct. 100%. 80%. Okay. Perfect. And make a note, guys. Observe carefully. Web application is using by one user or web application is using by multiple users. Web application is using by multiple users. How server is able to process multiple user requests at a time? Only one person is accessing our web application, or multiple people can access our web application? Multiple people will access our web application. Then how server will maintain each request? For my request, I'm getting response. For your request, you are getting the response. How server is managing those requests? For every request, server will create a thread. Got my point? To process every request, server will create a thread. That means server is implemented with the multi-threading. If you send a request, to process your request, one thread will be created. To process my request, one thread will be created. So to process every request, one thread will be created by the server. So my request, your request, their request, every request is independent. Every request is independent. Note. To process every request, server will use threads. To process client requests, to process client requests, note. To process client requests, server will use threads. To process client requests, server will use threads. To process client requests, server will use threads. For every request, one thread will be created. For every request, one thread will be created. For every request, one thread will be created. Okay, guys. Now, once our request processing is completed, we got the response, right? I sent a request, I got the response. Once we received the response, what will happen to this request object and response object? Come on. So is it going to use the same request response for second request? No, every request is independent. If I send a request, one request object create, one response object will create for my request. When you send a request, for your request, one request object will be created, one response object will be created. When he send a request, for his request, one request object will be created, one response object will be created. Here, our HTTP protocol is brainless fellow, that is stateless protocol. It is Ghazni. Once our request processing is completed, it will not remember anything. It will simply delete the request object and response object. For every request, new request object will be created, new response object will be created. Once we have received the response, it will delete that request object and response object. Our server will not remember anything. So when I send first request, it will treat that I'm a new user. It will take my request. It will process my request. It will send the response. After sending my response, it will delete the request object and response object. When I send a second request, again I am new to the server. Again server will treat I'm a new customer. I'm sending a new request. It will create the request object, response object, process the request, send the response, and delete the request object and response object. When I make a third request, same thing will happen. For every request, one request object and response object will be created. Next point. After sending response to the client, after sending response to the client, after sending response to the client, after sending response to client, server will delete request and response objects from memory. After sending response to the client, server will delete request and response objects from memory. After sending response to client, server will delete request and response objects from memory. Note, HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP, note. HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. That means it will not remember anything. It will not remember anything about previous requests. It will treat every request as first request. First or fresh request. HTTP is a stateless protocol. That means it will not remember anything about previous requests. It will treat every request as first request. It will treat every request as first request. HTTP is a stateless protocol. That means it will not remember anything about previous requests. It will treat every request as first request. Understood? Yeah. It will remove the objects from its memory. Internally, it will nullify garbage collector. It is a Java program. Huh? Yes, we can use it. Clear for everyone? So how server is handling multiple, this question they will ask in the interview. How one server is handling multiple user requests at a time? What is the answer? What is the answer? By using multi-threading. Our server is a program which is implemented by multi-threading. For every request, server will create a thread and it will process the request. After the request processing is completed, server is deleting that request object and response object. Now, in the interview, they may ask you one more tricky question. We have one web application. It is running inside a server. Today, 1,000 people are accessing my application. No problem. Tomorrow, there is a offer in my website. 1 crore people will access my application. How your server will handle that? Are you getting my question? So today, my server is running. My application is running inside a server. 10,000 users are accessing my application at a time. No problem. My server is capable for handling 10,000 requests at a time. That is the today traffic. That is the today traffic. Tomorrow we have big billion day. More number of users are going to come. How your server will handle that request? We don't know. 1 crore people may use, or 1 lakh people may use, or 2 crore people may use our application. How your server will handle that burden? Yes or no? Simple example, man. I will keep 5 kg weight on your head. Can you hold that? Yes or no? If I keep 10 kg? Yes. If I keep 100 kg? No. You cannot. You will fall down. Same scenario with the server also. When you send 1,000 requests, it can handle. When you send 10,000 requests, it can handle. When you send 1 lakh requests, it can handle. But when you send 1 crore requests at a time, server will crash. When server is crashed, our application will be down. Then how many people are using Gmail at a time? How many people are using Gmail at a time? How many people are using Zoom at a time? Crores, billions of people are using that, right? Then how that Gmail server, why that Gmail server not crashing? Why WhatsApp server not crashing? Why Facebook server not crashing? Why Zoom server not crashing? The reason is load balancing. Okay, in the real time, our application will be deployed into multiple servers, not one server. So if you deploy your application into one server, that server cannot handle the burden. Are you guys getting my point? So earlier I told you, in one server we can deploy multiple applications. That is possible. But if I do that, what is the problem? Load. So two different applications on the single server means different users will send a request, burden will increase on the server. So in one server we can deploy 2 applications, but in the real time what we will do, one application will deploy in the multiple servers. One application will deploy in the multiple servers. Why we will deploy one application in the multiple servers? To handle the load. To handle the load. That is called load balancing concept. Okay. If anybody asks you that question, how one server can handle 1 crore request. So when we are getting that much huge traffic, one server is not sufficient. Definitely we need to go for the load balancing. What is the meaning of load balancing? Distribute the load to multiple servers. run our application in the multiple servers. All the servers will be mapped to one URL, www.gmail.com. But actually, that Gmail project will run in 100 servers. 100 computers will be available. In those 100 computers, 100 servers will be available. Gmail project will run in the 100 servers. But are you accessing gmail1.com, gmail2.com? No. One URL is available. That is a domain name. We will send you a request to the domain name. The domain name will redirect the request to load balancer. Load balancer will redirect the request to the actual server. So that load balancing will understand in the project classes. All right. For time being, just keep in mind that so one server cannot handle millions of requests at a time. Burden will increase on the server. When burden is increased on the server, server is going to crash. So if you don't want your server to crash, you need to go for load balancing. That means we need to deploy our application to multiple servers. Are you clear with my point? Keep a note. When multiple users access the same server when multiple users access our server at a time, when multiple users access our application at a time, when multiple users access our application at a time, burden will increase on the server. Burden will increase on the server. When multiple users access our application at a time, burden will increase on the server. When burden increased on the server, burden, load. When multiple users access our application at a time, then burden will increase on the server. When multiple users access our application at a time, then burden will increase on the server. When burden increased, then our server might crash. When burden increased, then our server might crash. Server might crash. If a server is crashed, then our application will be down. When multiple users access our application at a time, then burden will increase on the server. When burden increased, then our server might crash. If a server is crashed, then our application will be down. Nobody can access. It will affect our business. If Facebook is down for 1 hour, $1 million loss for the company. Right? Stocks will be affected. Facebook revenue will be affected. Yes or no? Why Facebook revenue will be affected? No users. Ads will, how Facebook people will get the money, you know? If you use the Facebook, they will get the money? No. Facebook people will get the money because of the ads. Right? So when the ad is displayed, when you click that ad, for every click, money will be deducted. Suppose, so from our institute, we will run the Facebook ads. So whenever you see Facebook, in the Facebook, if you see our poster, when you click on that, so 2 rupees, 3 rupees will deduct from our pocket. So like that, we are paying money for the Facebook to run the ads. We are paying money for LinkedIn to run the ads. We are paying money for Google to run the ads. As a user, when you click on the ad, we will lose the money. Right? Like that, Facebook will get the money from the ads. Every company, in the social media, institutes, companies will run the ads. Right? If Facebook is down for 1 hour, ads will not run. Facebook will not get the money. $1 million loss for the company if the server is down for 1 hour. Are you clear with that? So now do you think that Facebook project will run on only one server? If Facebook runs on only one server, crash. For every minute it will crash. Project will not run. People cannot access. Then what Facebook company is doing? So they are deploying the application on the multiple servers. That is called as load balancing to reduce the burden on the servers, to reduce burden on the servers. We will deploy our application in multiple servers using load balancer concept. To reduce burden on the servers, we will deploy our application in multiple servers using load balancer concept. To reduce burden on the servers, we will deploy our application in multiple servers. We will deploy our application in multiple servers using load balancer concept. We'll deploy our application in multiple servers using load balancer concept. Got it? How the load balancer concept is going to look like? Just I'm not going to show you practically, guys, but I will give you diagram. Now assume that I'm taking one server 1, and same thing. Server 2 and server 3. Server 1, server 2, server 3. Like this, we are going to take multiple servers to run our project. This is called server 1, and this is called server 2, and this is called our server 3. Whatever the var file is available, right? That is app.var. We will be deploying the server 1. We will deploy in the server 2, and we will deploy in the server 3 also. Right. So my application running in how many servers now? 3. Like that, you can go for 10, you can go for 20, you can go for 30, you can go for 100 also. Depends on the load we are getting for our project. So in the real time, one project will be deployed into multiple servers. Now, when the project is running in multiple servers, can we give the users facebook1.com, facebook2.com, facebook3.com? No. All these servers will be connected to one manager. That manager is called as load balancer. Who is that manager, guys? That manager is called as load balancer. Load balancer will be available. All the servers which are running our application will be connected to load balancer. How many servers are running our application? All those servers will be connected to load balancer. Now here we are going to purchase a domain for our project. That is gmail.com or facebook.com, whatever the domain you want. We will purchase a domain and we will register that domain. For example, gmail.com. This domain will be configured to the load balancer. Whenever client request comes to this domain, that request will be redirected to the load balancer. Load balancer will redirect the request to the servers in the round robin fashion. What is the meaning of round robin fashion? First request will go to first server, second request will go to second server, third request will go to third server, fourth request will go to first server, fifth request will go to second server, sixth request will go to third server. Like that, it is going to process all the requests in the round robin technique. Because of this technique only, the famous web applications are never crashing. The Facebook, Gmail, Flipkart, LinkedIn, Naukri, Zoom, all the famous web applications are using this load balancing technique only. Are you clear? Now you are sending a request to the server. Now you are sending a request to the domain. We are sending a request to that domain. That domain will redirect our request to load balancer. Load balancer will redirect the request to actual server where our application is running. Do we know the address of the server? We don't know. We know only domain name. All right. Guys, in the servlet, lot of outdated content is available. I'm not teaching that. It is not required. Whatever is really required, I'm teaching that part. Because you are not going to develop single project also by using servlet in the company. Servlets we are understanding just to get the basic knowledge on the web development. So with this knowledge, we need to develop the project by using Spring Boot. Got it? So a lot of outdated stuff is there in the servlet. I'm not going to waste your time and my time for that. Whatever is really required for the web development, I'm focusing only on that area. Now don't ask me, sir, how to create a load balancer. We can't discuss that now. Huh? Okay, come on, guys. Note down. In the real time, we will use the Jenkins tool to redeploy. No, that is that load balancer concept. Load balancer architecture, I can say. In future, we are going to purchase the domain, and I will show you how to map our application to the domain names also. Huh? Yearly wise, yearly 3,000, 4,000 for that. Domain plus hosting. Huh. I have 3-4 domains. Huh? Domains. There are some domains free for, but some limited days they will give for free of cost. 45 days free trial period. Yeah. No problem. We can purchase a domain for $5. $5 means 580. Each dollar 80 rupees. $5. In the AWS cloud, we will purchase a domain for 1 year. It is $5. I will show you how to purchase the domain, how to deploy our application to that cloud, how to map our application to the domain name. That end-to-end flow we are going to understand. Okay. Completed. So now, how one server will manage multiple requests at a time? Generally, it will create multiple threads to process each request. So if load is increasing on the server, how to manage that load? By using load balancing technique, we are going to manage that load. So with this, we understood how to create first servlet application and how to run our first servlet application. And we understand the internals, how request is the processing in that. Okay. Can you take one requirement? Yeah. Develop a web application to display. Develop web application. Develop web application to display greet message to user based on time. Based on time. You need to find out what is the current hour. Suppose if the time is morning 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. to 12, before 12, you can say that now. So 11:55, 6 a.m. to 11:55 a.m. Then you need to display good morning. Okay, guys, based on the current hour, you need to display the message. If I run my program morning at 7 o'clock, I need to get the good morning message. If I send a request at afternoon, I need to get the good afternoon message. If I send in the evening, I want to get the good evening message. If I send a night, I need to get the good night message. So your program should calculate what is the current hour. Based on the current hour, it has to send a message to the browser. You got my point? Yep. Good morning. And suppose if it is from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m., it has to send me good afternoon. Client will not give any input, guys. Client will not give any input. Client will access your servlet just. Your servlet should identify that time. Based on that time, it has to generate the response. Okay. So 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., I will say it as a good evening. After 8 p.m., to 11:55 p.m. 5:50, sir, something like that. 5, 6, 11. After 8 p.m. After 8 p.m. to morning 6 a.m. That time zone will go there, and you need to get it as a good night. Okay. So you will make it as 5:55 a.m. And 6 o'clock. If you run in the 6 o'clock, it should give me good morning. If I run in the afternoon, it should give me good afternoon. If I run in the evening, it should give me good evening response. If I run in the night time, it should give me good night. That means that dynamically your servlet should send the greet message to the client. Got it? Develop a web application to display greet message to user based on current hour. Based on current hour. Based on the hour, it has to generate the message to the user. Yeah, you can do that. JDBC code you can execute. Do get is one method. Inside that method, you can write any logic. Are you clear with the requirement? Fine. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.